All right, now we are approaching the 1960s, and this was a very, to me, interesting era because there was so much modernization happening. Although, like in the late 50s, the mid-century modern looks started to come into play, but the 60s really encompassed it more than anything. Because there was a lot of things going on, in the late 50s that was still holding on to what was happening in the early 50s. So the 60s are probably remembered more by the hippie era or the hippie movement. And people were dressed in ethnic clothes and adorned their hair with flowers and ribbons, so like the flower child, look, and ladies of the canyon, if you will. Those who didn't go for the all-American girl next door look, they usually had their hair combed back and makeup kept very simple. The emphasis on being uber natural, healthy was very big, and women were going out to work and wanted easily to achieve hairstyles which could be fixed with, just quick hairspray to stay and pulled in place all day. The younger age group started to wear makeup at that time in very pale pinks and peach-colored pearlized lipsticks with matching nail varnish. The supermodel Twiggy with heavily lined eye sockets together with heavily contoured cheeks and huge wide-eyed became like every woman's dream to be able to do their makeup like that. Mary Quant, probably the most famous fashion designer of that day, was on the first to bring out the new makeup collection that had trendy packaging which captured a new young fashion market. Mary Quant cosmetics are still available today, like in London, in England, in some markets, and not so much here in the US, but definitely other places throughout the globe. At that time, instantly became so recognizable by the original Mary Quant Daisy logo, which is still used, and it's quite cute actually. And there was another model, Peggy Moffat, who was like known as the mod model, and she was always having her hair in like kind of a tulip bowl cut with those super duper heavily aligned eyes and very almost kind of like Picasso-esque looking character. Super skinny, long, wore really bright, very intensified color schemes. Modigliani, she wore Pucci. Those are like some designers that she would wear. So definitely look into this era because it is such an incredible artistic era. You also had, of course, Audrey Hepburn, who did various films, and her looks, went from one style to another, and I love her and what she represented in that look. So definitely, if you wanted to get an influence of a look, she would be a good one to follow from the 50s to the 60s. She was definitely an icon on many levels. During the 60s, many women in the Western world were influenced by feminism, and they decided to go out as kind of a rebellion to wear no makeup. The feminist movement felt makeup contributed to the second-class status of women, making them more sex objects who wasted time applying cosmetics. So there was definitely this other group that kind of came into play that really just demoralized makeup. As the 60s makeup trends were ultimately focused on the eyes, the rest of the face was somewhat subtle. A matte look was popular and created with both foundation and or powder. Blush and rouge, as they called it at that time, became popular in the 1960s. The beauty ideals were such that the blush indicated the look of color was more for the skin, which indicated health. Blush is all about health, remember. Not much of that philosophy has changed. The makeup of the 60s was all about the eyes. So lots of liner, lots of everything that really pops the eyes out. In particular, the eyelashes were also the focus for the opening of the eyes. The eyeshadow was often bold in colors such as blue, pale pastel-y colors as well. And the 1960s were the beginning of the cat eye eyeliner trend. So a lot of what we're doing right now with liners are definitely the influence of the 60s look mod, and therefore the cat eye eyeliner really is a big part of what's going on even till this day. A liquid eyeliner, and now what kind of replaced a lot of the liquid eyeliner is gel liner, but back then they used liquid eyeliner. So the women of the 60s lined the top of the lids with the ends winged out, so they would do the fishtail kicks on the end of the eyes, and black eyeliner was most common, so it was kind of like all the women wore it, whether they wore it lightly or heavily. Women typically applied false eyelashes for that bold look. Black mascara further opened up the eyes. So, if you think about the 60s, I always definitely think about matte makeup, pastel-y colors, and then lots of eyeliner and lots of lashes, false out eyelashes. And hair was usually cut in a very bowl cut, like a very kind of bob mod. That was very typical. Or women wore their hair, or there was the other side that just rebelled and wore nothing. So 1960s, really interesting. And towards the end of the 60s, you definitely can see how it transitions into the 70s. And during that time, that transition between the mid-60s, late 60s, and early 70s, you go through so much transition there. It's really interesting. Oh, and I want to mention the beatnik. The beatniks were very a league of their own, and women, would be a little bit more tomboyish, but at the same time still imbued a lot of femininity, and they definitely did their eyeliner and they did their lashes, but they were also they had a moment of modernization in the way they wore it, but they were also classical at the same time. It was very interesting phase. They wore a lot of plaids, and like Burberry was a very big influence, Brooks Brothers and things like that. Lots of hats, apple caps, and things like that. So yeah, it's really interesting era. Check it out. 1960s, really fun era. Very, very fun era. Think about Beatles, think about Rolling Stone, how much influence the Woodstock, which was much more towards the 1970s, but I believe it was like 1968 or 69 that Woodstock happened, so it typically was considered more 70s, but it was more in the late 60s. But yeah, so definitely check out as many looks in this era, because it will definitely be a great influence for what you will be doing in your makeup application and designing, and you would take a lot from the 1960s. Oh, another movie I want to definitely refer you to see that epitomizes the 1960s is an Audrey Hepburn movie called Two for the Road. A great movie, and if you can get it, definitely look at it. You could probably YouTube it and get some looks from it. You don't have to see the whole movie, but yeah, it's a really great movie. It's with Albert Finney and Audrey Hepburn, and it's such a great look. And when we talked about Mary Quant, a lot of that, Mary Quant and Paco Rabanne in that era, you can see a lot of their influences in that movie. So enjoy, and we will now go into 1970s.